What's up, Stacy?
Yo.
We are live right now. 58 people tuned in and just jamming a little bit, So that's how we start here. Just, grooving to the tunes a bit, just feeling into everything,
Love it.
I keep hitting the loop button on this controller. All right. Awesome. So I'm super excited. Everyone here, let me get this music off now. Like to start things a little bit goofy. Can you hear me all good? How's your audio? Want to do a quick test?
Yeah, let's do it. I can hear you, but for some reason the music was going into my headphones, but your audio is not. So I'm going to see if I can.
We got Tommy backstage. Give me a thumbs up if you hear Stacy. Okay, I think we can hear you good, Stacy. So
Sweet.
As long as you got me, I think we're good to go.
Yep.
Super amped up for you jumping into this very last minute. I know I had a little bit of a cancellation on the podcast, and I was like, "Hey, Stacy, do you want to jump onto a podcast in like 2 hours?" And you were like, "Let's go."
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Love it. Stoked to be here.
Yeah. I think just checking on audio stuff right now. Oh, can't hear you there, Tommy.
So I just came on stage. Hey, Stacy, nice to meet you. We're not actually live on Twitter right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, let me just double check why it's not working. Okay,
I think we're live on Twitter.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
double checking on things. Let's take a peek here. I think we're live. Yeah, I think we're live on Twitter. We should be good to go. Awesome. Well, yeah, like I said, just like thanks for jumping on here last minute. And just to give a little bit of an overview of like what we're doing here, what we've kind of relaunched. I started this about over a year ago and then took a pause on it as I got busy with life and things, as many people do when they pause their podcasts. But yeah, it's something around going deep into discussing community strategy and how projects are thinking about community, as well as just bringing on awesome guests and different projects and talking a bit about what you guys are building, what you're focused on, what you're up to. And then I like to share a lot of like as much value as I can to listeners and people tuned in. So I usually try and share like a tool of some sort because, I'm a big fan of using all sorts of different types of tools. And then even like a framework and a way of thinking through things. But that's a bit of an overview. I've got a few questions specifically for you too that I pulled together. But yeah, I'm excited for this time together. Let's start off with, I'd love to hear an introduction from yourself, and then I'll take it from there.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm stoked to have this conversation. I'm Stacy, and me and my husband, Mike, are building a personal financial management app for creative professionals, founders, and freelancers who kind of deal with this variable income and the unpredictability of creative life. So, we can kind of do the fun stuff and not so much of the boring stuff. So that's kind of what I'm working on now. But my background is I spent a decade freelancing, working in advertising as a creative professional myself, marketing, doing events, and I love it all. It's really fun to just stretch your skill set and learn a bunch of new things. And then now kind of really my focus now is learning AI tools so I can make my business the best that it can be.
Nice. Yeah, and I think like we're in a day and age where there's such a low barrier to entry for creating different types of products and things when it comes to now AI enabled development. And there's a lot of just cool tools on the market and even agents now coming into play more. So definitely keen to jam on a lot of that. And yeah, it's an interesting space when how do you look at utilizing elements of AI and tools to empower you and save you as much time. And, you know, one little insight, one tip on like a tool or something that works well for you can just save you just immense, like bring in just so much efficiency to your business. The one tool that I actually was going to highlight today, I changed it out when I knew that we were interviewing you because I had a coffee meetup this morning. And he's a member of another community I'm in, Myosin, Ollie, and his wife has actually built this tool, which is really cool and is about storytelling. So when we get to that, I'll share that. But I know your background with storytelling is like, I feel like that's a really perfect fit. So excited to give a little tease on that one. But as we kind of get started and like, you know, we're in the community stratosphere right now in this space, like, you know, really innovating and thinking through strategies on retaining your community, building loyalty and these types of things, it becomes a really big buzzword just in general, community. And so I like to like start things out from everyone that we interview here, just to get your like definition on how you would like define community. Curious to hear.
That's a good one. And I totally agree with it can become a buzzword, but I think it's so powerful, and I want to get back to those basics, right? And to me, a community is about a group of people that have a shared set of values, and they care about each other, and they have that sort of net, that membrane that keeps them caring about these same values and value systems. And brands can come in and be part of this and create community around values that are represented in their product, in their products, and in their projects. But the community is already exists. It just or the people within the community already exist and they already care about those things. But then you're just kind of putting out your call to your people and then helping them connect and be part of that. And of course, if your product works and is good and reinforces those values, then it'll be successful.
Nice. That's a really good answer. I think it's a really good start into like with Finch, with what you guys are building there. And you've been really kind of, I think you mentioned like kind of innovating and researching into elements of your brand, and how do you think about attracting people, right? Like how's that journey going, and how do you feel, how are you mapping things out there, and any sort of insights, or like what's your thought process right now on how you think about retaining, bringing on community members and retaining them into your product, and in a way, because it's an element of kind of like SaaS as well, right? Maybe what would be helpful is like give a brief intro on like what Finch is, and then on how you're thinking about this journey that you mentioned.
Yeah, I could give a brief understanding. So think about, it's probably easiest to understand in the context of like thinking about a budgeting app. And just imagine a budgeting app on AI steroids and designed for people who don't just take monthly income and have monthly expenses. Maybe we're nomadic or creative. So it's designed to be really intuitive in that way. Hopefully that gets a basic layer of understanding to then for me to share kind of what just to share what my journey has been with this. So really started out with like very broad thinking, and the past really 6 months, I'm gonna say I probably spent 4 of it just delving into what's the market, like who are these people, and seeing kind of what the research then called out in me. We started with kind of a generic financial concept that wanted to string together crypto and traditional finance, which it still does. I didn't even mention crypto, but it does include crypto. That is a need for these people, right? But it kind of became this niching down into the specific target market that needs what we can give them. And we're not going to be a generic we don't have a financial background. I mean, Mike did enterprise architecture for finance companies, but like that's not our specialization. Our specialization is we come from the freelancing and startup world, right? So this is has helped us niche down and understand what we're actually building to then attract our actual community, not just people who want a generic finance app. So that is the foundational thing that probably has taken an unbelievable amount of my time and energy, but has really, I think, set us up better than we would have been if we had just kind of started sprinting with this more broad concept. And then more lately, it's been about, okay, well, I'm leveraging a lot of AI tools, as I mentioned, to create workflows that help me, identifying okay, we have our personas, we have our people, we know who they are. Now, how do we reach them in an effective way while keeping the authenticity and like personal touch? And so a lot of that is like me putting in a lot of testing, content and in defining our voice but defining it in a way that AI understands, so I can actually scale this and do it all by myself, right? In this day and age, like, we're not thinking about like raising money so we can hire like 30 or 40 people. That's not how we're thinking about it. We're thinking about small teams, a few contractors to start, scaling really slow, doing as much as we can ourselves because the tools are so good, and building our own tools to do that workflow. So this component of setting our community like outreach, foundation up then gives us the ability to create layers on top of that then reach them more effectively, and also like allow them to connect with each other around a more, not just like, hey, we have a product, come buy it or come, subscribe, but really saying like, we see the problems, we've been there, let's like tell our stories, let's be us in this space, and then attract people and bring them in that way.
That makes a lot of sense. And I feel like you're embodying a lot of the ethos of like the mom test, like the whole aspect behind that book where you're like asking people questions about their problems. And, it's all centered around similar things related to your product. So then depending on their answers, you're getting like these little insights without revealing exactly, what you're building to remove any sort of component of what, for hypothetically what your mom might say just to support you, right, if you're telling someone about it. And I remember like at MegaZoo before DevCon, like this is like some of the early stages of when you guys were really starting to cook, I guess you could say, right? Like curious on like any of the discussion or conversations there were like larger unlocks early on around this like early product framing, and if that was really like helpful for you guys there.
Yeah, MegaZoo was freaking awesome. And especially considering, to the community point, right? Like creating, there's so many layers of community, right? But that was cool because we all kind of got to create community around these Web3 ideas and values and companies together, which was really fun and meaningful. And like a lot of the people I've been talking to, I'm very heads down right now, but the people I do talk to are from there or from, other communities in Web3 that I'm a part of. And that has been really important in a longer term way of, as a founder, building my own community of people who are like-minded to me, not just like my audience, but like me, so that I can benefit from the shared knowledge of people like you, Dan, and other people that we know, to accelerate and hopefully accelerate. We all accelerate together.
Yeah,
through community fashion.
Totally. And just rewinding a second, there was something else that you said there, and I was like, oh, this is really similar to one of the questions that I pulled, which was because I know you're really big into utilizing like automation and AI from, you mentioned on your workflow side of things. And I thought it was a cool question, which is around like, what are some surprisingly like human outcomes that you've gotten from AI or automation? And if anything kind of comes to mind, because I think that's also like for people helps really unlock their mind when you realize some of the benefits and things that can can often like really actually land. So I'm curious if anything like that rings a bell on anything, feeling very human from some of those tools.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. I think I am on AI Twitter a lot because I'm just like trying to keep up with everything. Um, and it kind of is disappointing a lot because you get in there and they kind of hook you in. They're like, we're going to tell you about these AI tools. And you start watching it and it's just like, copy this prompt, then this and this. And it's like, what would I use this for? And what I've found is like, you can take some inspiration from those things. But what really happens is when you start doing that and you start performing your own workflows, you start trying to do these like automated things, is you really start to learn, what am I adding to this equation? Where are the like ideal, like I just press a button every month and my social media strategy is going and my community just loves it. Like that's not real, but that's okay. The cool stuff is I get to do what I really want to be doing, which is finding our voice, talking to people, sharing my story, and creating and actually like connecting with people, and that is way more valuable and way more interesting to me than like I don't know, just I don't want to be sitting on a beach doing like one press like 4-hour work week style. I really do want to be in the trenches talking to people, and so this has enabled me, or my goal is to let this enable me to really automate everything that's not so human. This like managing spreadsheets of content, but really do the things that are human, the storytelling and the relational building of a product.
Yeah, no. So this is like, I actually don't have this written down at all, but what you're saying here, I'm really curious because it's a question we often ask clients when we're onboarding them, when we're talking to prospects. I generally, and I just had a coffee meetup a few days ago when we were talking about this. I was like, what's your plan around the narrative and like the storytelling for your brand? Because it's a lot of, aspects to, what we've coined as this element of like a go-to community strategy, like the GTC is what we say, and like how it works very closely with GTM, like being like go to market. They're like peanut butter and jelly, they go right together. And to understand a lot about the GTM plan, about the narrative, about what you're doing to get the attention is very, very important when you're thinking about designing the community side, because it is a cohesive bridge. You want to obviously have an element of where, GTM and marketing is definitely important to capture the attention. And that's one of like the, differences between the two of them. The one is a value capture model where you're going and you're fishing and you're trying to get people's attention. And, in the Web3 space, the attention economy on crypto Twitter is wild. It's like everyone's, Laudio, whatever, all this, yaps and snaps and all this stuff, right? Everyone's trying to get the attention in different ways. And it can be difficult. It can be expensive. You have to think through different, elements to capture people. And then we find that there's just not as much strategy or thought then on that next level of like, how do you retain them? How do you build the loyalty? And, it's a bit of a leaky funnel with a lot of projects where they go to all this effort to make an amazing, funnel and get a lot of attention, but then not exactly capitalize on the people coming in and organizing them and segmenting them into the right spaces. And so I think of that as like the value creation side of things, where you're designing a watering hole and how can you attract people to that and build advocacy and build loyalty in these things. But just going back to how important it is to understand a lot around the narrative and the storytelling, because, we build different like missions or quests or campaigns that move people through that journey, that make them aware of that value. And we need to understand and be singing the same song as like the marketing team, so it is a cohesive bridge. So we work very closely with, the marketers with our clients and the projects like that we're working with, because it gives us just that edge into making sure that they're the right, that's landing, that's connecting. And I'm curious to know from your side, like how do you think a little bit about that bridge between getting the attention and thinking about it a little bit more around the overall narrative and the direction of the brand and the storytelling, and how important that blends from like marketing into like kind of community. Because I'm curious to hear your storytelling take, because I know you're a brilliant storyteller, and I'm curious to hear.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head. And I'm curious, actually, I would love to hear more about how you think about GTM and GTC going hand in hand. This is definitely like very much so what I'm trying to wrap my head around right now. As far as the storytelling components, I think you have to build a brand like you're building a legacy. And if you build a brand and you're building your story for 15 minutes of fame and a token launch, you're going to fail in the long run. You might make money. You're probably going to succeed at that objective. But if you want to build a longer term sustainable project, and I think the listeners here want to build a community for the long term, to build like sustainable value, then you have to think about it in a lot longer of a time scale. And attention is not necessarily the best metric for this. Everyone's competing for attention. If you compete on attention, like how much attention can you capture, what are you really, you're competing against, like what and who. You think about it, right? Because these are like what influencers, you're competing against brands with like billions of, like huge budgets. Who are you competing against when you're competing on attention? But if you're competing on value, then your strategy is going to be completely different. And the story is going to be driven by that versus what's the fastest, catchiest hook and the best, like what's the most hype thing that I can do to get the most engagement, to get the most traffic, to drive the best metrics, to show my boss, right? We've been there, right? But that's, and I think that's kind of also comes down to the company culture component. Is you're telling a story both to your customers and to your clients and or to your employees. And if your marketing team is only hearing, well, we need X metric and we need Y, we need number of, like, we need numbers to go up, that's not going to be driving your best value. So I think taking the step back to think about what's the longer term legacy that you want to be leading. Maybe that's just 1 or 2 years, and then you're going to reassess. But then craft your story for that. Decide what's the overarching, undercurrent, whatever, metaphor you want to think about here. Like, what is the basis of like the values that you're trying to propagate, and how does that intersect with your product? And then the story is going to kind of come out of that in connection with the community. And the community, if you start telling them, this is what we stand for, and this is what our values are, and this is what our product is, and you are clear and you start understanding who those people are, they're going to reflect that story back to you. You may not even have to write it. You're going to hear it back from them. And that's the really powerful thing about, GTC, right? Build your product, go to community and build your product with that as the basis. Wherever you're starting with your product, like, keep building it for those people.
Yeah, you touched on an interesting point there with like, how do you weave in co-creation, and then this, like, also I think with storytelling also taps on a big component of belonging, right? Actually, one of the Audible books I'm reading right now is a book about belonging. And when you can make someone feel like they're a part of something, right, and that they have like their own say, their own stake into it, and in one way or another, they have some sort of like just like string that's like attached, that becomes attached from them to the product or to the even to the community itself. It like that starts to really topple the dominoes towards this like element of loyalty, right? And I'm curious on co-creation. Is there any insights or ideas that you guys are thinking a bit about, or that you've seen work really well when it comes to involving community into co-creation?
Yeah, I think this is something I'm really early on in figuring out how to do. I have a strategy, kind of like I'm sort of casting a vision for it, but and I'm seeing the results of it, but it's very early. So what I've been doing and what has been working is talking to potential users as much as possible, as many as possible. Reddit, your friends, people who I used to work in the industry, in the like film and freelance, other freelancers who worked in the creative industries with me. as many people as you can. So start talking to them, and not, here's my product, understand it, this is mistakes I made, so don't do what I'm doing. But not, this is my product, but start asking them questions about the problems that they have. These are kind of, I know these are sort of fundamental things, but I think especially in Web3, we forget about the fundamentals. So come back to those, start talking to users, and start like hearing what stories they're telling you, like what challenges have they been through. And I think there's also a cool thing, as a founder to see this is, or as a marketing professional to be like, see like parts of my own story reflected in that. And it reminds me why I'm doing what I'm doing, because you can lose sight of it. But I talked with someone yesterday who was telling me it's been really hard since 2022. And like freelancing is really hard. Income is so crazy, and the industries are really shifting. And it reminds me of all the times when I was like, shit, I'm going to have to go get a job. I'm going to have to like, who do I call? And those are like the real moments where you experience, you get to empathize, and that empathy builds the connection that the story is founded on. And the product is kind of the story, these things sort of merge at this level. I mean, some people may be able to segment it out more effectively than I can, but to me, that's the way I feel about the product, is that I'm telling a story. I'm trying to tell my story through a product and help people connect with, connect with that, and connect with the parts of them that have had the same experiences, and hopefully solve some of those pain points for them.
Interesting. Nice. There's a bit of a rapid fire question thing that sometimes we jump to towards the end. And one of the questions I like to kind of bring up, which is sometimes gets a degree spicy, and it's just interesting to hear different people's answers, but you just touched on to like a couple of those points. And so I'm curious to know, like, community or product first?
Community first. What product are you going to build without knowing who you're building it for?
Interesting. No, it's that aligns quite closely with even like there's an ACP funnel thing, which is something like Greg Eisenberg, who's a pretty cool creator, and he's got a cool community around startup community and AI stuff.
I love him. Yeah.
He's got great content, and he's got a podcast as well, different things. And his ACP funnel thing that he talks about is like build an audience, build a group of people who are following you, whatever, and then think about then like who's actually your diehard audience members, and build your community, C. And then from your community, listening to them around the industry that you have expertise and their problems, build a product that like fixes it, right? Where you can really tap into people's problems and things. So it's like an interesting element to think about. But it's great because last week, we had Doris, and she's building a super cool product, and she's product first. She's like building something that's really innovative using key store layers, and it's like interesting because it's like, I told her, really, I feel like the answer to the question kind of depends, which is why it's fun to like ask people it, right? Because what she's building, there's not really, it's like optimizing something, but not like, it's an existing pain point for sure, a problem point, but people don't even understand like the technology of what she's building. Like it's like next level from what they're doing there. So like they're innovating and working hard on the product first, and then educating the community on the technology behind it, and then building more of like the community from that side of things, like focusing on getting something working first too. But so I think there is an element of it depends both ways. But I think like, I love your answer. It's very aligned with some of the ways that like we think with, tapping into different, aspects of the value that you get from like having a strong community, like it really is a big moat and a big insight driver for you, So I thought that was kind of something neat to highlight. But there's something actually I wanted to pull up here, which is like a bit of like, I actually just slapped this on this extra page here, and it's a bit of a throwback, and I wanted to pull it up because this is how we really first met too, was with this project. I'm going to start sharing screen now.
Oh my God. Yes. The GM bus.
There is the GM bus. So,
oh my God.
this was like a really cool project that I think it'd be
Mm.
kind of fun to just like chat briefly on. It's how we first met in 2022. Um, and it was a big thing for me, like getting into the space. Like big shout out to like Yaler, who really like championed, you know, this project, I guess you could call it, in a way, and created this. And maybe you can speak more to where the idea came from for it, and explain it more. And then I'm curious just to like, you know, it's an interesting one. So where did the GM bus kind of originate from? And tell me a little bit about like the vision for it, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. What a great throwback. I'm not 100% sure exactly where the idea came from, but I can tell you how it came into my life. Is from Sinjin Art. I don't know if he goes by a last name, but anyway, Sinjin, who sent me kind of this list. I met him through kind of the same community as Gaylor and some others. And he sent me this list of like innovative, creative advertising ideas. And I was like, hell yes, I love this shit. I'm here for it. And I was like, this bus thing sounds like it has a lot of potential. Some of the ideas I just really called out to me. And he was like, yeah, I'm just going to take a bus around, take it around the country. And so I think, this collaboration of ideas and just, I think a lot of, maybe there was a bunch of back and forth of this idea ping-ponging across the people and just kept bouncing back, right? It kind of in the community, right? It really was. It's all about community. And then it kind of turned into this imaginative canvas of like just calling people to to think outside of the realm of what they've typically considered possible, which is where the prompt that people may be able to see on the bus, the prompt is, what if things turned out better than you imagined? And so we had this written on the bus, and then people took little chalk markers and wrote their answers all over the bus. And I think somewhere that's all captured. The bus went all around the country. It was at MCon 2 in 2022. It was at, I don't even know how many other conferences it was at in the US. A bunch of folks took it around, and it was just such a pleasure. So fun to work on it. So cool. And yeah, I got to meet you, Dan. Really, the best thing that came out of it.
that was a big win. Yeah, in Denver, I think it was at MCon. And yeah, this was such a cool project. I agree to, really make people. It's a weird question. What if it turned out better than you imagined? People just kind of think there for a second. They're like, wait, what do you mean? And making people tap into thinking about the future in different ways, right? And it was because I drove it so I did a pretty big leg in it from New York. I drove it from New York down to Texas over the course of like, I think 2 weeks, and stopped in multiple places, and it gets everyone's attention. They're all like looking at like, what's this thing? It's a little crazy looking, van coming in here, whatever, right? And then it opens up conversation, and then I would explain to them that it was like sponsored, by like Chainlink and a few other projects and stuff, right? And then start to explain what like crypto is, and then we had the green pill book, and we had those books in the van and hand out the books to people. And it was cool to like, as I was in the process of going deeper into learning blockchain and learning about crypto, to then getting into like just teaching people, like random people and strangers and like parking lots. And like, I like what that middle picture is. I camped in just like some provincial, or not, like some state park, like parking lot, and just like would just pop up the roof and just camp wherever. And it was a really cool life, and had the Starlink so like still tapped into like meetings and things, just throw the Starlink up on the roof. But I had a blast really like, challenging myself in answering other people's questions about crypto and understanding blockchain and pilling them, with the green pill book about what we were doing. So I thought it would just be kind of fun to like throw it back and share it. It was an interesting project, to lean in and do, right. But yeah, I guess I do want to share that one like tool and get into that. But before we do that, I'd be curious to know as well with like, where are you at with like the next few months, like with what you guys are building? Like, tell me more about what's coming up for you guys, what you're excited about, and what you're cooking.
Yeah. Cooking pretty hard over here. It's like I was telling Steph the other day, it's just like heads in, locked in over, we're in Asheville, North Carolina, so we're just like we're not distracted by anything. It's great. Um, Great place to live, but we're not distracted by all the great, flashing lights and amazing people. So the next few months really look for us is we're going to be we're really right now it's about starting to build this community for the product. So rather than just like a brand announcements and things, it's going to be really building community and hearing back from people like on our social accounts. And then from there, we're building the product in the background. So we have a pretty clear idea, of course, of what the product is going to look like, but the intention is really to continue to drive it forward and prioritize what we put, how we build it, based on the feedback that we're getting. So I've been always a little overly bullish on timelines of like when we're launching, but the goal is definitely to get it beta into the hands of some folks by the end of the year. And it's just with the way that the workflows are going, it's looking pretty promising. So yeah, it's exciting. And then we'll be at Dev Connect end of the year, which will be great.
Nice. That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah, I think the progress, and I remember just the initial element and like the pitches at Mega Zoo. I was always very like intrigued to know like this is going to be cool to see how this develops and shapes. And to your point, I feel like through conversations and through just different insights, like everything starts to slowly start to take more of a different shape. Like as time goes by, as you like learn feedback from different people and start to include some of those elements. So that's exciting to hear. It's going to be definitely one to keep your eyes on and follow. Well, cool. Around like just like this this tool here, so this is like the URL of the tool, and so I have to be very transparent here. I just learned about this tool like 5-6 hours ago, having coffee this morning, and I have not tried it out myself. But I know there's a 1 week free trial is what he was telling me, and he's really recommending it. And then when you swapped into joining the live stream, I was like, oh well, storytelling tool. I was like, gotta pull that up, right? So I think I'm also just gonna pull up. Let's see here. This window as well. I have it open. And it's interesting because I think a lot of AI tools also from like, I don't know, talking about product a little bit now, will come from this where someone has, and Patrice, she has this, a lot of knowledge, a lot of IP, a lot of data, a lot of insight, around a certain topic. And then how do they now turn that into an agent? And if you notice in the URL, it's actually called Pocket Patrice, because she's kept hearing from certain people, from her clients that she was consulting with around storytelling and things like this. They're like, oh, I wish I could just have you in my pocket, And now that's like starting to become more of a reality where people can take their expertise and turn it into an agent that you put in your pocket and have it like, a close element to it. So it's interesting to kind of see how this is like a potential pathway with in the space of taking your knowledge and your IP and then building it into more of an agent that you can utilize for a certain thing, right? So you can monetize your IP, your information from more of a SaaS model, which I think is really cool. And I think he was mentioning her background is in all sorts of things, like the different things she's featured in, helping brands with their storytelling, like some really big name brands, even components of journalism. I just thought it was really, insightful. Gracie award-winning producer. So like, there's just components that like, I think AI in general, can really get you just a little bit further along the ideation way, steering you to the right direction to then where you can start to form things a little bit more. But yeah, I thought it was a cool one. I'm curious what you think around like a product like this. Is this something you would try? What's your initial thoughts?
This is awesome. I am stoked to try it, and I think it's a great tool because I think I have a few friends who are like, we work with founders to help them tell their stories, and it's because it's hard to sometimes put really ephemeral things that are driving your product, and why you're building what you're building into a story format, because you're locked in and you're doing what you're best at. And that might not be storytelling, which is totally fine. Even as a storyteller, it's really hard to do it for yourself. It's sort of the like Achilles heel of it. And I think that this is really cool, and I'm gonna give it a try after this and see kind of how, that, like, let's take it. Let's do a test.
Yeah. Also, it reminds me a little bit of what I was saying earlier. Like, shout out to Gaia Network. We've been doing lots of work with them, and what they're enabling is this element of being able to monetize your IP and having it on chain, right? And being able to have different kind of components of building an agent and that infrastructure all kind of set up for you in different ways with like their nodes to then providing knowledge to then being able to access it. And it's like a little bit of a what's the word, like a fight against the centralization of like AI power when it comes to like open AI and ChatGPT, just like accumulating so much data. How do you start to own some of your own data, right, in different ways? So no, really interesting. And I think like it was she's got a cool little video at the top talking about where the idea came from in this little thing, which I was listening to earlier. And it's just neat to see someone who actually really pivoted from feedback from her community is where it started from. Like, she started to build an audience around the consulting and then had this kind of core community, and then literally got this feedback that she needed to build this as like a tool and a product. And there was a cool little story actually that Ollie told me, her husband, around how there was a conference and a member of her community who was a user of her product was on a panel. And when she was on the panel, there was something that came up about storytelling, and she was like, "Oh, the best storytelling tool in the space, the founder is sitting over there in the audience," and like pointed Patrice out, right? And then after
Nice.
the panel, she had a line of like 10, 15 people to like come and talk to her about it, right? And if you were to look at comparing, how much, you'd have to spend in paid ads to get like that type of like lineup of someone to like want to talk to you about your product versus having created an advocate through your community and then into a user of your product, it's just like such a like a great example use case of like the value in building a strong community and having someone advocate for your product. It's so much better to have someone tell, like I think the statistics around how people buy from what their friends' recommendations versus the company selling it themselves, it's just a massive difference, right? Like, there's a trust component when someone says, like, Stacy, you should, I'm fully endorsing this. I've used this tool a ton. I love it. I get a lot of value out of it. You definitely should like subscribe to the subscription. You're gonna love it, right? Versus them just like advertising to you, right? So it's an interesting component. I'm not sure if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, social proof is powerful. And if you're doing anything with community, doing anything with product at all, and you don't have some forms of social proof built into your marketing funnel, like this should be on your website, or it should be you should be like thinking very like thoroughly about how you lead with that. Just to comment on the trend of this, I think what we see like with My Story Pro AI and what we're going to start seeing even more is people, like you said, taking their workflow IP. I mean, I'm doing this with my marketing workflow, right? It's like taking your workflow, your IP, and then wrapping it in a way. This is the new coaching, like the way that coaches popped up, a dozen years ago, and it's just been the proliferation of everyone selling their coaching methods and finding their niche communities and then marketing to them and then selling coaching plans and selling selling all their different special formulations of how you can do it. Now imagine all those PDFs and courses become AI. Like, that's just what this is going to be insane to really witness. and free business tip that designed for those people, right? Build products for those people, because like there's going to be a lot of them, and it's going to be really like you said, a decentralized way of use the base tools and the LLMs that have been developed by these big companies, but then create specialized tools for your people, that leverage your own IP and your skill set, and experience. And that's going to be, I mean, I'm just so stoked to see it happen. I love it.
Totally. And like now jumping into I always have like a framework that I generally share, and it's very relevant to this kind of conversation. I'm going to pop up here as well. And this is something that, is more on, I guess it can often be thought of in the lens of also more the marketing and growth in GTM. But I often think about it on like, what are the community value factors, at each of these stages, and where does it start to become, more relevant and more, impactful. And this is the R model, 3 A's, 3 R's, and, love a good acronym on, with these frameworks. So a lot of them have this to pull, I guess, your memory into the different steps of each stage as they do. But this is a really good one around pulling people from a value funnel perspective, especially talking about like product, or talking about like what Finch will do around helping people with like the smart budgeting elements and understanding their behavior patterns in different ways and whatnot. So like, how do you think about these different stages? And this is walking through, if you're just listening here, like around awareness, then to acquisition, then to activation, then to retention, then to revenue, and then to referral. And I think we can even think about how these different personas in the community often exist in some of these stages more than others, like ambassadors, right? Like their whole purpose is around like driving advocacy and bringing like referrals and driving revenue from a community perspective. How can we design the community around being a place with loyal members and retention, and working your way up? Like, how do you activate them right away on their onboarding experience? Like I like to call it the OX, because I feel like in the Web3 space, that's really not thought through as well either, is how do you actually design an experience when people jump in and onboard where they're actually captured, they're hooked, and they know where to go next, and they're not just overwhelmed by like a million Discord notifications and 50 channels and get like distracted, right? But in general, I'd love to know like your first take on like, this framework in general, how it feels like it might apply in one way or another to like Finch, as well to kind of community strategy. Curious to hear your initial thoughts.
Yeah, it makes me think of what we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation, and about, essentially retention, building for people to stay. You want to cast the net. If you're sort of drawing people in and you're trying to magnetize the right people to your community, then you really want to be thinking about how you're keeping them there. Attracting people to sign up for free trial of your whether it's AI or you're getting people into your Discord, all of that is great, and that has great initial metrics, but retention is kind of the name of the game. You even can see this in subscription app models that have proliferated over the past this age of internet. A 5% churn rate monthly is pretty standard, and that's huge. And eventually you just are going to run out of people that are going to sign up for your app that have not already. So design for retention first, and be thinking about, and when and this is not just a product, of course, product thing, but this is a community thing even more than it is product. A community that cares about you and that's waiting and sitting there and like, we care, you're adding value, there's a lot of value happening here, is going to wait that extra whatever milestone until you reach the next product feature rollout that they are looking for. And they're going to be paying attention, and they're going to be co-creating with you in that process. But you need to keep them there in order to do that. And so there's no easy or fast way to do it. There's no shortcuts. It takes a lot of like one-on-one, it takes a lot of touch, it takes a lot of time and energy and thought. But I think that the companies that are going to succeed moving forward are going to be the ones that really focus on retaining, versus just, oh, well, I'll just keep attracting attention. I'll just keep clicking, buy ad. That's not going to work. Like, that's not going to work moving forward. You're going to need to keep people, and not lose them once you have them.
Oh, that's such a good answer around a core component, obviously, of one of these verticals. But there's a book which I highly recommend, honestly, to everybody. It's not even just fully SaaS, but it's called SaaS, Software as a Science. And actually, it does feel like it applies to even like I learned things from it from an agency model side of things, as well as like anything that you're basically thinking about building and selling. There's a lot of really good insights and models in there. And one of the chapters, which goes in deeper on retention, has this whole comparison on like a revenue model and like when you hit your growth cap and all these different things. And it walks through these different numbers. And it's like actually really like mind boggling to see how valuable it is to have like a lower churn, to have better retention versus having like a higher churn. There's really, you would also like maybe initially you're like, yeah, it sounds better to have like, good, retention over instead of having to spend more to acquire a new customer, like looking at your CAC versus like your LTV, and everything. But it really, when you actually see the numbers on it too, it opened up my eyes a little bit on the examples. It's like, wow, this is really like, it really impactful, right? And there's lots of little tidbits and things from metrics in that book as well. Even some I'm familiar with already on the community side, which is like thinking about like a stickiness ratio, which you can calculate by looking at your daily active users divided by like your monthly active users. And you can do this in a couple ways. You can do daily active users divided by weekly active users, and then that's like in a single week, what's like the likelihood that someone is active every single day, of those who are active like in the total week, right? So how much are people coming back? Like, sure, they might be an active user in a week, and it's good to know your WAU and your MAU and all this stuff. Like, this is very common to know your monthly active users, but how, like in your monthly active users number, how often are they visiting your product? Are they coming in every other day? Are they coming in every day? Are they coming in just once a month? Because it still hits that, number of your monthly active users. So if you can go a little deeper on what's like the stickiness, like how often do they actually like percentage wise kind of come back, it actually drives a lot of like insights, and it's a good numbers to track, especially when you have a lot of people or a lot of users, just to give you that little bit of direction on, this product change, did this change our stickiness, ratio if I added in an extra product feature. And that's like a core component that we often have with community design, is this element of looking at analytics very closely, doing different initiatives, whether it's an event, whether it's a quest, whether it's like something we change in the structure, and then looking very closely at how does that change the analytics. We do lots of deep community analytics, and then looking at how much engagement, how much retention that builds, and then it's like a flywheel, right? So this is something that I feel like is obviously, has these close parallels of product and community, where you can do the same thing with products, like make tweaks in your products and see how that improves, the product usage, how many people, tap into it. Similar with community, how do you tweak an element of it and design it in a certain way where people keep coming back? It's like a little bit of my maybe like mechanical engineer. It's always just like, variables, constants, and like trying to like break it down different ways. But curious if you got any maybe thoughts on that. It was a little bit of a ramble.
That's the best way to do it. And I think you always want your metric, you always want the data you're capturing to feed back into your inputs, and enable you to like make better business decisions. And I'm curious too, I mean, even simulating, predictive performance is something I've been really looking into, is, developing tools to predict performance. Predict performance on whether that's content, or, you know, in terms of what you're talking about, like community involvement, or even, yeah, feature rollouts. That would be super sweet, to do that for product features. But I'm curious, you know, with this in mind, is how do you think about community like metrics, like what you're talking about, these like you know, like understanding your monthly active users in the context, or your daily active users in the context of the monthly, you know, how what percentage of them are coming back daily. How do you think about this in the context of, my question, what's the best, how do you decide what is best? Because like some of these apps that we've been using for forever have been like, oh, we want all of your attention, we want it right now, we want all of it, like give it to us, give me 24 hours a day of your eyeballs. And I hate that. And I don't want anything I'm using or any of my companies or communities I'm part of to be just like grabbing from me. I don't want that. But I want to know that the people in my community are coming back when it's valuable to them, and knowing that I'm adding a lot of value is important. But I don't know how to measure that. I don't know how to like track with like optimal engagement versus, what's optimal and what's best. And maybe it's not a one size fits all here.
Yeah, I mean, the cop-out answer is always like, it depends, which, yeah. But like, I think as a general rule of thumb too, like there's this aspect to a scientific approach in general, right? Where at the end of the day, you got to take whatever you have in front of you, metrics, engagement data, the interviews, like insights from community members, and start to form some sort of like hypothesis that you can kind of actually like test, right? And I think this is where a lot of projects often go wrong in a way, is like one person thinks of an idea, or something pops up like, let's do game night, on Thursday night, let's do game night, think of that, but like, have they looked into some of the data and what people are like interested in, and like, have they polled it all, have they had any interviews, and do they have some form of like information that has generated this, like, and I like to say this scientific approach, like this hypothesis, right? And then you form this hypothesis, and then you run it, you go with it, you see how this initiative goes, and you try and you set it up in a way where you've got the right tracking in place to understand the downstream effects of that initiative, right? And that's what we've been spending a lot of time on, actually doing some like custom building with bots and things like this, to make sure that we can understand a user journey and understand what a user's doing on the platform, or in a specific like community initiative that we are designing or building for a client. And then using all those analytics, it's like you have a bit of a benchmark from before, you understand what happened during the event, you see how long it lasts afterwards. It starts to drive an understanding of like, did that build more engagement? Did that build more of a relationship? And then eventually, like, did that actually contribute to a degree of more trust, like more feeling of belonging, right? And then, okay, like depending on what that looks like, can we change it up a bit? Can we just tweak what we did a little bit to try and optimize it? Or should we do something different and see how well that works? And then when you see how well something else works, you might get a lot of insights there to understand a bit more about like, if that makes more sense. There's actually, I think I might even be able to get fancy here. But boom, this is it. This is like a little overlay of that flywheel. So like, starting in the bottom right hand corner, and like, designing the initiative in a way, right? Then measuring how much engagement it builds, how much relationships it kind of deepens, how much trust it creates, and then looping it back and going again. And to do this, like, it definitely helps like to go deep into data, understand this is elements of like sentiment, like heat mapping, like how active were they during this campaign, what were the keywords that were said, different things like this, where then you can start to map out more of these like persona funnels, and what are the different decisions that they make in different ways. But I don't want to go too deep on this, or I'm just gonna keep going. So
that's awesome.
About that so far.
That's great. I feel like first of all, I need like an hour to process that. And I need all of those documents blown up and your voice narrating the explanation of them. and then I'll come back to you with questions. But actually, I think that's great. Like, all jokes aside, I think, you know, what you guys are doing is really cool, and it's changing. The narrative, and everything that's happening in this space is so different. Not just Web3, the world, technology. It's happening so fast, and everything's changing. And it's not going back to a an attention sucking model. Like, we're moving into more and more community building models where companies might not get as big as they did before. And I think that's great. Because like, you're going to be looking for your 1,000 or your 100,000 true fans, and you're going to be niching down to really serve them. And so the community aspects and understanding how you measure, quantify, and grow, and know that you're building trust, building the underlying values of, what makes a business work in the long run, is going to be so important. That you need a dashboard for that. You need some type of analytics, and you need some type of framework for evaluating these things. So it makes me happy that you're doing this. And yeah, put me on your calendar for later, to walk through it more.
Definitely. I'd love to jam with you further on this. And yeah, like, I think on the whole GTC side of things, like, there was this, I did a talk in Denver, and it was on this. And one of the components that I talked then about after that flywheel is just like, elements of gamification that can give you ideas of an initiative, right? And there's 10 different mechanisms of gamification. And I think a lot of the time AI is often great just to give you that ideation, to get that just like brain going, a blank paper, like, you're like, blank paper, blank mind, like, don't know what to kind of start with. Like, okay, yeah, Dan, you told me to form a hypothesis and like do an initiative, but like, I don't know, there's like so many different types of initiatives I could do. Like, where do I start? Like, how do I think about something that might relate to like my community? So I like, going into prompt engineering, coming up with different prompts. And there was a really great marketing prompt that I like forked, I guess you could say, in an open source fashion. And I ended up revising it a little bit and changing it to create a table of initiative ideas based on what you input around your community, around like your persona of your audience and things like this. And if you scan this QR code, this is an invite to a Telegram community, which is just is called GTC Goodies. And we'll have to, like, honestly, like, we're going to hopefully get some more goodies in there and update some more like prompts and things like that can help you. But the pinned message in that group is a Google Doc, which has this prompt I was just talking about to give you some ideas on community initiatives. So you can go ahead, open up that Google Doc and copy paste that into ChatGPT, or pick your model of choice, and fill in the elements that mention they need to be filled in around your community mission, vision, like what's your community about, who the persona is. And then it can help brainstorm some ideas around different community initiatives. And then you can think about maybe, make a hypothesis on some of those. If some of your data or some of what you're doing or your feedback seems similar to one of those ideas and one of those grids, because it makes a whole grid for you, go ahead and launch it, but try and make sure that you track how it actually works and how, the impact that it drives. And then that can give you insights into where you can go from there. So that can maybe help get people started on their flywheel. So yeah.
This is great. It pulls right up to, I think, the prompt that you fill in, and that is sweet. Yeah, I'm gonna have to try this out.
Yeah, you have to let me know how it works for you in a way, right? And then and then we can jam further. But cool. I guess, like, getting to a close here in the next few minutes. Maybe we'll do a couple like short, quick questions, like a little rapid fire ritual in a way. And then just so everyone's aware who's like tuned in and listening, we're going to be doing, and actually it'd be great if you want to chat about this further. On Friday, we do a Twitter Spaces now. And it's similar to an office hours that you might have with like a developer office hours where you can ask technical questions. We're holding community office hours where you get to ask community questions, and I try and support as much as possible with any ideas or any pain points in your community, and it's just like totally open to just hearing what people are thinking about when it comes to community design. And so it's been great. We've had a whole variety of people come on stage the last few weeks. We started this about a month ago, it's like, you never know what type of issues or things people are going through. So me and Tommy host that together, and it's really a fun time. I actually really look forward to it on Fridays. It's a very chill vibe. It's very fun, and it's just like, if you've got any questions from this like podcast that you're listening, or wanted to go deeper, wanted to ask me anything, that's the place where you can kind of like easy to get a hold of me, and we can go deeper into questions live and stuff on a Twitter space, which is kind of fun. I think it's a neat concept.
Sweet. I'll bring my questions.
Perfect. Yes. Get them armed up and ready. Cool. Well, I guess like a couple quick questions. What would be one word to describe your community so far at Finch?
The word that comes immediately to mind is creative, and I'm just going to roll with it. I think creative is the right word.
Nice. We're going a slightly spicy one. We've got different takes on this. There's definitely, it's a world of pros and cons, but would love to hear your thoughts. Discord versus Telegram.
I am super biased, and I just cannot bring myself to use Discord. I just can't do it. I uninstalled it literally months ago. If communities at this point, coming from a not tech native person, if a company is asking me to go to their Discord, I am not engaging with their company. Like, it's not going to happen in Discord. I'm sorry for everyone who uses Discord. Telegram is where it's at, but I also think that, so the more nuanced answer is I was thinking about this when I was looking at the prompt that you shared. And also I think about this a lot in terms of you and what you're doing with Unity, is that neither one of them is really effective at doing what we're trying to do when we're building community. And neither are social media platforms, and that they all have their weaknesses. So I think there's a great opportunity for a true disruptor to come in and create like a better version. And a lot of people have tried, and it's freaking flopped. And so but someone will eventually crack the code there. And it may be a completely unexpected form factor, and I'm here for it. And I think it's going to be conversations like these where we're really talking about what does and doesn't work with the current tools and how you're building community. It's these kinds of conversations that will hopefully seed the next iterations of tools for building community, because they just, we're constrained by the tech right now.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I've had a conversation at one point where I was like, man, I kind of want to just like build my whole entire own community platform. But then it's just like, I don't know. It's a gargantuan task when you think about building that
huge.
thing. I'm like, I was like, if there's anyone out there who's thinking about it and able to pull, some serious, funding for it, I'm happy to be an advisor.
Yeah. Dan will be a great advisor. I mean, the other thing is you just give it enough time. I think it could just be something later on down the road. I think something like this is going to be created over, many iterations of ideas, and then it will just kind of come together at one point. So maybe that's still you, Dan. It's just like a little later.
Who knows?
I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the next one. If you're, you already have a mascot. It was like, for projects, if your community had a mascot, what would it be? But you've already got a cute little mascot. You guys like your mascot, right?
We're actually going to rebrand, but
Alpha.
I know. I think a mascot probably for us is, I think it's still a bird. I really actually like a goose the best.
Maybe a Canadian goose.
A Canadian goose, eh? Yeah, I think because, and the reasons are, First of all, because geese are fun and they're fierce. They're very memeable. But in terms of a finance app, the story of the goose that laid the golden egg is a really good moral. And I think it also speaks to the values that we need to be infusing into crypto and Web3, which is, the story of that is that the guy got a little greedy and he killed the goose and took out all the eggs, and then he had no more goose and no more eggs. And I think this is an apt story to be thinking about, because it's better to have a sustainable source of income that you're investing in. Care for your goose. Take good freaking care of it, and value and treasure it, and don't squander that, because you don't know when it's going away. And that's the sustainable life that I think we all want financially. And then fear causes us to kill the goose and hopefully, to just like extract. And that's the reason behind the goose. A goose will probably be our mascot at very soon, when we have finished our rebranding process.
Interesting. It's a very close parallel to just like, there's an actual storytelling narrative, that's in a close parallel to, what you're building, which is very cool with your mascot. And yeah, you when you were saying that, I was literally having flashbacks to, being back home in Canada and just like going to the soccer field, and these geese are just shitting all over the fields, and they're running at you, like very aggressive, and you got to run away. You know how it goes, eh? But anyway.
The Canadian Air Force,
Yeah. We got a big Air Force.
It's the empire, really. The Canadians have taken over most of North America, if you ask the geese.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful. This has been such a good time. Thank you so much for just like jumping on pretty last minute, and open to just having a great conversation. Had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. I think there's lots of new things that I even just learned through conversation with you. As we start to kind of close here, is there anything that you want to leave with the people tuned in? Any sort of like maybe one of your insights from the last hour, or even just from your journey with Finch, that you think would be valuable for everyone to hear?
Yeah, I think it's hard to summarize, and there's been a lot of good nuggets. I've really learned a lot too. I think it's really just tell your story for build your community for the long term, and then track and measure that. And it's actually a lot simpler, but it's hard to do, and it takes work, and it's a bit of a grind, but it's a good, really meaningful grind. So yeah.
Nice. The end. Appreciate that so much. Got Stacy, got your socials at the bottom right here, scrolling across the screen. So definitely go give Stacy a follow. Keep your eyes on Finch. And then as for myself, I'm at the Dan Rodman on Twitter. And you can also find Co-Unity, where we specialize in community strategy. As you can tell, we're jamming a lot on community strategy in this call. So definitely, I'm sharing a lot more on Twitter now, being more active. I've been heads down for the last 3 years, and just over the last month, I'm trying to get my head up and talk more about our brand and what we're doing, and bring on awesome guests like you, and start to have these discussions so that people can hear more about the things that we've learned with the different clients, and also just share more of that, and just be a little bit more vocal. I'm hoping to potentially might be speaking at ECC, which is exciting. So hopefully refining that whole GTC talk. So I might be able to find me there. And then if not, definitely, like I said earlier, swing through the community office hours on Friday, and we'll catch you there. So thank you everybody for tuning in. And thanks so much, Stacy. This was amazing.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dan.
All right. Peace out, everybody. Ending the stream. Boom.